I told my wife, Sophia, that my seminar had wrapped up a day earlier than expected, but unfortunately, I couldn't change my flight, so I'd still be home late Tuesday evening. She was supposed to pick me up from the airport around 6 p.m. She didn't hide her irritation about me being gone for another night, but she threw in a line about how she'd be delighted to see me, though her tone didn't exactly scream enthusiasm. After stewing over it for a while, I started to feel a little guilty. I had been traveling a lot lately and figured I owed it to Sophia, my wife of 17 years, to put her first for once. So, I decided to head to the airport and see if I could make something happen. Honestly, I almost gave up, but then I noticed there was a flight to a different airport near our town. Normally, I fly into an airport about an hour north of us, but this one was nearly 2 hours south. I had never used it before, but I checked and saw there was a flight leaving in 30 minutes. I figured, why not? So I went up to the counter and was shocked at how easy it was to snag a ticket. Before I knew it, I was in the air, and a few hours later, I was on the ground. I rented a car and expected to pull into my driveway just before midnight. Sophia was going to have to find a way to show her joy at my early return. I couldn't help but chuckle to myself as I imagined her reaction. To keep the surprise intact, I decided not to call ahead. I wanted to catch her off guard. When I got home, it was right around midnight, but the house was completely dark, and Sophia's car was nowhere to be seen. That was odd. I brought my bag inside, started unpacking, and tried to keep my mind from racing. Where could she be this late? I didn't want to jump to conclusions, so I called her cell. She picked up on the third ring, sounding groggy. I played it cool and just asked how she was doing. She told me it was after midnight, and she'd been fast asleep. Said she was all set to pick me up at the airport at 6 a.m. the next morning. Her being asleep didn't make much sense, though, considering she wasn't even home. So, I casually asked where she was, adding that I'd tried calling the home phone earlier and only got the answering machine. She fumbled through some excuse about the house phone being broken and having a repairman coming in the morning. My head started to spin. She wasn't upstairs asleep, that much was clear, but I didn't want to accuse her outright. Still, it felt like she was weaving a pretty flimsy lie. I then told her I wouldn't be on that 6 a.m. flight, explaining I'd stay a few extra days and call when I had more details. She made a big show of saying how much she missed me and wanted me home as soon as possible. I played along, telling her I couldn't wait to see her too, and then we said our goodbyes. As I hung up, though, I swear I caught a faint hint of laughter in her voice. That didn't sit right with me. Out of sheer curiosity, I dialed our home number again, and wouldn't you know it, the phone rang. No problems with the line after all. Normally, I'd crack a joke with myself in this kind of situation, but I didn't have the energy for it. I went upstairs and searched under the bed, in the closet, even the attic, just to make sure she wasn't hiding somewhere. I muttered to myself, "Ladies and gentlemen, Elvis has left the building. I may not be a genius, but I'm no fool either, and something was definitely off. How could I have been so clueless?" It was hitting me hard now, pretty damn clueless. The next morning, I got up early, moved the rental car to the other side of the street, and waited. Around 7 a.m., Sophia's car finally pulled up, but it wasn't her behind the wheel, it was some guy. I quickly ducked into the junk closet by the front door and cracked it open just enough to see. Sophia walked in with him, all smiles. She told him she needed to change for work and grab some clothes so she wouldn't have to come back in the morning. He chuckled and suggested they could do it again while she changed. She laughed it off, but said if he was late, she'd have to fire him, adding some sarcastic remark about how he seemed to enjoy being her boss. Apparently, his wife thought Sophia was the perfect secretary. I couldn't help but think about what Sophia would say to his wife, probably something equally vile. The guy had only been with the company for a couple of weeks, as far as I could remember, but here he was, acting like they'd been sneaking around for years. He made some sleazy joke about how he'd already told his wife about Sophia, mentioning that Sophia was younger than his mother-in-law and much slimmer. He laughed as if this whole situation was some kind of game to him. Then he went on about how he'd told his wife he was house hunting and would be away from the hotel for a few days. Sophia came back in the room looking all dolled up, and they shared a private laugh, probably at my expense. The guy, his name was Daniel, and I guess he was her boss, pulled her in for a slow, intimate kiss. The kind that's hard to mistake. I could have grabbed something, anything, and confronted them right then and there, but I stayed put. He then suggested she stay with him the following night, have dinner, and be back by 8 p.m. He even mentioned showing her some lodge after talking to the owner. Sophia seemed thrilled by the idea, playfully asking what kind of tour he had in mind, and then, with a smug little grin, she tossed in, "What if my husband comes home early?" Daniel, without missing a beat, assured her that I'd call him first to set up a ride from the airport. A whole day's notice. Daniel made it a point to emphasize that if I didn't call him today, there was no way I'd be. Sophia seemed to find that reasonable enough and joked that I was probably some kind of Navy SEAL. In her little fantasy, if I walked in on anything unexpected, I'd probably hand Daniel a beer and apologize for the inconvenience. Can you believe that? Daniel played along, saying I sounded like a real pushover, and then brought up how his wife would lose it if she ever caught him cheating. He seemed to think it might actually cause him some trouble, unlike me, apparently. Sophia, ever so supportive, said that fear kept most men in check, though Daniel didn't seem all that scared of his wife, at least not most of the time. Daniel admitted that if he got caught, he'd be in serious hot water, probably lucky to come out of it alive. But, since his wife was all the way down in Houston, he felt like he was in the clear. That's when I stopped paying attention. I was too angry to listen anymore. My blood was boiling. Not only had my wife been cheating on me, but now it was clear she didn't even respect me. As I sat down, trying to process it all, an idea started to take shape. I remembered something Sophia had said about her new boss. She mentioned that he was being transferred from the company's headquarters in Houston. That was enough for me to start digging. I needed to know his full name, so I made a few calls. A little charm with the receptionist at Sophia's work, and I had all the details I needed. His name was Daniel Brooks, married with 2 teenage kids. His family was staying back in Texas until the school year wrapped up, and they'd be joining him in Springfield later. He was supposedly looking for a house after work each night. I jumped on the internet and found 3 Daniel Brookses in Houston. My very first call was a hit. When I asked the woman who answered if she was Mrs. Daniel Brooks, she said yes, and I could hear the curiosity in her voice. I quickly spun a story about being Ryan Mitchell from Halifax and told her I was planning a small surprise party for her husband, Daniel. I said the company was going to give her and Daniel round-trip tickets to Springfield as a fun surprise for him. She seemed delighted by the idea and asked for more details. I kept it vague, only saying the event was scheduled for the next evening. I gave her flight information and told her that the company would take care of all the costs. I also made it clear that the whole thing had to stay hush-hush. Her husband wasn't supposed to know. She agreed to keep the secret, which was perfect. Next, I started reaching out to Sophia's friends and family, telling them I was throwing her a surprise party. I told everyone that Sophia had just gotten a promotion from her boss, and we were celebrating. They all bought it, and I made sure they understood it needed to be a complete surprise. I told them to be at our house by 7 p.m. sharp, so we could make sure Sophia would be there. I wanted everything to go off without a hitch, so I arranged for food and drinks from a nice local restaurant. I made sure the caterers knew to set everything up on the veranda next to the living room by the pool. Sophia had always dreamed of hosting a party there, so it seemed like a fitting touch. I told the caterers that the house might be empty when they arrived, but to just go around and set up outside. The next day, I made my way to the airport about 30 minutes early, keeping an eye out for Mrs. Brooks. As passengers streamed toward the baggage claim, I approached a couple of women who seemed to be traveling alone and politely asked if either of them was Mrs. Brooks. Before I could get too far, a woman addressed me directly, introducing herself as Mrs. Brooks. I was nearly floored when I saw her. She looked like she'd stepped right out of a movie. I introduced myself as Max, quickly explaining that my wife worked for her husband. She seemed a bit cautious, and I could tell I had to think fast. So, I joked about how people often said I married an older and bigger woman, but I reassured her it was just because my wife had more experience and, well, there was more of her to love. She thought about it for a second, then smiled, which was a huge relief for me. We picked up her luggage and headed for the parking lot. By the time we got to my house, it was around 6:30 p.m. I explained that the party was going to be outdoors, partly in honor of her husband and also to celebrate my wife's birthday. As more guests began to arrive, The caterers finished setting everything up, and I had to admit, it looked impressive. I didn't realize I could pull off something that looked so professional. By 7:30 p.m., everyone I'd invited had shown up. I had them park behind the church down the block to keep our driveway empty. I told everyone to be patient and quiet once the guests of honor arrived. The plan was for me to hide in the living room, and as soon as I saw them pull up, I'd turn off the lights on the patio as a signal for everyone to hush. We had these sliding glass doors that led to the veranda, and there were vertical blinds that could be opened with cords. One cord opened the blinds horizontally, while another pulled them apart. We also had some thick curtains we used in the colder months. The curtains were thick enough for me to hide behind while I reached for the cords to the vertical blinds and the light switch for the veranda. A few minutes before 8 o'clock, I saw Sophia's car pull up in front of the house. I quickly turned off the deck lights and slipped behind the curtains, creating the kind of quiet, suspenseful atmosphere I wanted. The door opened, and the sound of laughter filled the room. Sophia and Daniel were having a good time, no doubt about it. I thought to myself, well, at least they're having fun. Daniel, in a playful tone, said he was looking forward to some alone time with her since they rarely had moments like this. Next thing I knew, he was helping her out of her dress, revealing she was only wearing a thong underneath. They were in high spirits, clearly. Then, as if it was just another Tuesday night, Sophia casually slipped off her thong, teasing Daniel about how playful he always was. Before I could really process it all, Daniel pushed her down into my favorite chair, and they started getting busy right there in my living room. That was my cue. I calmly flipped on the light. Sophia jumped up, startled, and blurted out, "What are you doing here?" I couldn't help but think how absurd her question was, given the situation. I mean, did she really need an explanation? I simply reminded her, "This is my house, remember? My name's on the deed." She looked flustered and mumbled something about being surprised that I was home early. I just nodded, keeping things casual. Daniel, on the other hand, was already muttering excuses about needing to leave, claiming he had other matters to attend to. That's when I, with the calmest demeanor I could muster, offered him a drink. You should have seen their faces. Both of them were stunned. Daniel, in particular, seemed to be weighing the irony of the moment. Sophia had joked earlier that I'd offer him a beer if I caught them together, and here I was, doing exactly that. I couldn't help but smile, watching the wheels turn in his head. Before Daniel could stammer out a reply, the door burst open, and in walked Mrs. Brooks, his wife, holding a purse the size of a small suitcase. Without a word, she swung that thing like a bat, and Daniel went flying a good 5 feet from where he stood. If you're wondering if I enjoyed that moment, well, I did. Not long after, Sophia's mom and sister showed up. There Sophia was, completely naked, and her mother didn't hold back. She scolded her, telling her to get dressed, and even joked that maybe Sophia should consider a career in adult entertainment, given her recent performance. Sophia was too shocked to respond, and when I turned on the porch light, she finally saw what she hadn't noticed before. 20 of her closest friends and family were standing outside, watching the whole thing. I figured I'd leave them to it, so I went outside, grabbed a plate of potato salad and some wings, and helped myself to a beer from the fridge. I came back and sat down, watching Daniel try to pull himself together while Sophia scrambled to regain some sense of dignity. The whole scene was a train wreck, but I wasn't the one responsible for it. They'd done this to themselves and dragged everyone else along for the ride. At the end of the day, though, it was better that everyone knew the truth. No more hiding. As things calmed down, Sophia's cousin offered to take Mrs. Brooks to a nearby motel. Another cousin helped Daniel to the car and offered him a ride to the same motel. Sophia's mother asked if she wanted to go with them, but Sophia refused. Her mom understood, saying she knew I was angry, and although Sophia deserved a good scolding, she figured her daughter had suffered enough for one night. And with that, they left. Sophia disappeared into the bathroom, and I heard the shower running. I have to say, that was probably the best beer and wings I'd ever had. Sitting there, reflecting on the chaos of the evening, I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. Every now and then, things just line up perfectly, and the plan works out exactly how you imagined it. That night was one of those rare moments. After finishing my meal, I started cleaning up. It took longer than I expected. There was a lot of food to store, and I had to pack up all the leftovers. It was well past midnight by the time I sat down at the table with one last beer. I was finally able to relax. That's when Sophia came into the room and sat across from me. She looked tired but composed. I asked her, "So, are you happy now? Is this really what you wanted?" I couldn't help but wonder how things had spiraled so far out of control. She sighed, then mentioned that time when I got caught with my boss. She said something about people getting the wrong idea and how maybe that's why she acted the way she did, as if promiscuity was contagious or something. She was grasping at straws. Then she accused me of setting up this whole party to hurt her on purpose, like I was the one who betrayed her. I grinned, shaking my head, and asked, "Do we have a problem, Sophia?" She kept going, saying she never meant to disrespect me and didn't think I'd ever find out about Daniel. She had the nerve to act like I was the one at fault, like I had somehow brought this on. Finally, after all her rambling, she said what I'd been waiting to hear for years. "If you'd been around more, none of this would have happened." She blamed me for not giving her enough attention, claiming it made her vulnerable to Daniel's advances. That was the last straw. I couldn't help but burst into laughter. She was trying to pin her affair on me, trying to make me feel guilty for her own choices. As I closed the bedroom door behind me and locked it, a deep satisfaction welled up inside. My chains had been broken. Emotionally, I was free, and soon I'd be legally liberated too. I felt a strange thrill as I anticipated my new life. But enough of that story. Now, let's move on to another equally exciting one. Funny enough, I should be at work right now. Instead, I'm sitting calmly at my kitchen table, nursing a cup of freshly brewed coffee. It's odd how calm I feel, considering what's unfolding upstairs. This routine, coffee in the morning, has always been my little ritual. I used to get up an hour earlier than the rest of the family to enjoy this moment of peace before the day started. Back then, it was soothing. Today, it feels almost surreal. My name is Liam Carter. I've been happily married for 25 years. Well, at least I was, up until about 2 hours ago. Olivia and I have 4 children. Our youngest left the house last year, and it hit Olivia hard. She was struggling with what people call empty nest syndrome. I suggested she find a hobby. I just didn't know her new hobby would involve someone named Stallion. About an hour ago, I came home early, unexpectedly. I forgot my briefcase in the garage. When I walked in, I heard Olivia, my wife, upstairs, shouting, "Do it, Stallion! Come on, baby, I know you can do it." It didn't take long for me to realize what was happening. Oddly enough, the smell of my coffee brewing downstairs didn't interrupt their enthusiasm. Usually, Olivia would come rushing down at the mere aroma of fresh coffee, but not today. She was far too busy. The noises from upstairs continued, moaning, creaking, and words that were crystal clear in their meaning. "Tell me how much better you are than my pathetic husband," Olivia urged, to which her lover responded enthusiastically, "Oh, my God, you're so much better. Lovely." I had briefly considered engaging the safety on my gun, just in case, considering her Stallion was a cop. How did I know? His uniform and gear belt were strewn across my living room floor, right next to my wife's clothes. I didn't need to be a detective to figure out what was going on upstairs. Between the rhythmic thumping of the headboard and the constant creaking of the bed, it was hard to concentrate. Judging by their enthusiasm, this wasn't their first time. In fact, Olivia was suggesting they find a way to meet 2 or 3 times a week instead of just occasionally. My wife, my beloved Olivia, was scheduling her affair right in front of me. So how did I end up in this nightmare? Well, it's a bit embarrassing. I went to work but forgot my briefcase. Actually, I left it in the garage because I had to rescue the cat, Hannah, from under the hood of my car. It reminded me of our first cat, Bob, who wasn't so lucky. One cold morning, I forgot to tap the hood before starting the car and, well, Bob met the fan belt. Hannah, fortunately, was smarter. Apparently, I wasn't. As I was about to leave the briefcase behind, I noticed something. My wife's new Lexus in the driveway, and next to it, a police cruiser. My heart sank. I thought something terrible had happened to her. I rushed into the house, nearly plowing over her garden gnome in the process, only to be greeted by the sound of her moaning from our bedroom. "Take me now, stud. Make me feel good," Olivia called out, followed by more explicit praise of his skills compared to mine. She didn't just cheat on me. She degraded me with every word. As disturbing as the sight of her with another man was, it was the constant verbal humiliation that stung the most. "God, you're so much better than Liam. Give me all of it." And that really spurred her stallion on. The whole house shook with their exertions, the bed thumping, his grunts getting louder. I could hardly bear it. They did it on my side of the bed, too. My wife was riding him like a cowgirl, telling him how much she loved it, how much it turned her on to do it in my bed, on my side. I couldn't take it anymore. I ran to the bathroom and threw up everything I had eaten that morning. My heart raced, my mind a jumble of betrayal and shock. How could she do this to me? How could the woman I loved for 25 years betray me like this? And yet, here I was, still sitting at the kitchen table, drinking my coffee. No whiskey, though I felt like I could use it. But I needed a clear head. This wasn't just some random affair. This was a full-on betrayal of everything we had built together, and I needed proof. Video and audio. Cold, hard evidence. I was surprised they didn't smell the coffee or hear the commotion downstairs, but I guess they were deeply focused on their activities. It was hard for me to fully process what I was seeing, even after everything I had witnessed. My wife, Olivia, 50 years old, was sleeping with a guy who couldn't have been more than 30. He was in great shape, but I couldn't figure out why someone like him would go for someone else's wife, especially a woman who wasn't even in the same league physically. It just didn't add up. The whole ordeal dragged on for what felt like forever, but eventually, after 90 minutes or so, it got quiet. They must have taken a break. Then, I heard my wife ask, "What's that smell?" Her boyfriend didn't respond, but I heard her panicked voice exclaim, "Oh my God!" Suddenly, there was a flurry of activity. Closet doors opening, drawers being rifled through, and what I assumed was them frantically trying to erase any evidence of their affair. I made a mental note to get tested for STDs. That's when they saw me. Olivia gasped in shock, and her lover, Stallion, looked just as stunned. He glanced down at his uniform, which was nowhere to be found. Dejected, he muttered something about his service weapon. I grinned and replied, "It's not there, stud." He looked confused. "Your boss took it with him when he left." Thoughtful guy. Huh. His expression changed from shock to pure desperation as he started frantically searching the pile of clothes on the floor. "Oh, and he also took your throwing arm," I added. I think the missing serial number upset him the most. That's 5 to 7 years, right there. Former Officer Lucas Carter looked completely defeated. "We had a nice chat, your boss and I, while you two lovebirds were busy upstairs," I continued. Olivia's eyes darted to the window, realizing her lover's patrol car was gone too. "Yes, he took the patrol car," I confirmed. "Your boss said you were supposed to be providing security at the construction site tonight, but now he's got that covered." I couldn't help but enjoy the scene. He was going to take your uniform too, but figured you might need it when you leave. Olivia's boyfriend looked like he wanted to disappear, and honestly, I was just getting started. You could call your wife for a ride home, but probably not. She was a little upset about that video I emailed her. Something about her father being the chief of police. Anyway, you seem to have a nice family, Lucas. At this point, I was savoring every second. I'd ask my wife to drive you, but her car's been impounded. Olivia let out a high-pitched squeal. Oh, didn't I mention? There were a couple of ounces of unaccounted-for weed in the front seat. Sergeant Jake said they'd usually just write a ticket, but he felt they owed me something for all the trouble. You'll probably get it back in a few days, after the forensics are done. Olivia didn't scream. It was more like a pitiful, sad moan. A broken sound, like a lost dog howling at the moon. "Well, officer," I said, turning back to her boyfriend, "I think it's time for you to put on your uniform and leave." And so he did, albeit with much less swagger than when he arrived. Once he was gone, Olivia finally found her voice. "Please, Liam," she began, her voice shaking. "I love you." It didn't mean anything. It was just a fling, nothing more. "Oh man," I sighed, mockingly. "I wish you'd told me that sooner. I was really worried you loved him and that you were going to divorce me. Now I feel bad. Did I overreact? Liam, of course I love you, she pleaded. Why would you doubt that? Her words were empty, and I wasn't buying any of it. Well, besides the infidelity, making love to him in our bed, and calling me a spineless idiot, there were a few other signs, honey, I said dryly. She quickly interrupted. I never meant that. It was just bedroom talk, to get in the mood. Then, she shifted her tone, a look of worry crossing her face. Wait, you said you overreacted. Liam, what did you do? She was nervous now, paying attention in a way she hadn't before. Well, just when I thought you didn't love me anymore, I began, watching her squirm. I sent the video to our kids. I wanted them to know who their new daddy would be. You might want to give them a little time before you call. They seemed upset for some reason. Her face turned white. Oh my God, you didn't, she whispered. I nodded. Yep. And there's one more thing, I added, watching her dread grow. Your lover's wife works at the same company as you, right? I think she's the executive assistant to the CEO. Don't worry, though. I asked her not to fire you. After all, you'll still need your job when you get transferred to Little Rock. Olivia was speechless, her face a mask of despair. I stood up, delivering the final blow. Oh, and one more thing. My attorney says that since you make more money than I do, you'll be paying me alimony, about $3,000 a month. Liam's composure remained unshaken as he navigated the final confrontation with Olivia. He found a peculiar satisfaction in the way things had turned out. His decision to take a long fishing vacation was almost a way of reclaiming his own peace of mind after such a tumultuous day. Deep-sea señorita fishing in the Gulf of Mexico, he mused, reflecting on the irony of finding solace in a place far removed from the chaos of his home. He had meticulously ensured that Olivia's infidelity was not just a private betrayal but a public spectacle. The photo and video of her compromising situation had been shared with her parents, her colleagues, and even her friends on Facebook. Liam had done everything he could to make sure that her actions were well known, in his mind, as a form of poetic justice. Olivia's emotional collapse was palpable as she sat on the floor wrapped in a sheet, her body shaking uncontrollably as she sobbed. The high-pitched, mournful sound she made was a stark contrast to the calm demeanor Liam maintained. He had prepared himself for this confrontation and had no intention of showing mercy. With a cold detachment, he instructed her to get dressed and pack her belongings, emphasizing that the house would be sold as part of their divorce settlement. His words were deliberate and devoid of compassion, reflecting his resolve to move on from the painful episode. The arrival of Olivia's parents marked the final act in this personal drama. Liam opened the door for her, maintaining a facade of courtesy despite the circumstances. Farewell, Olivia, he said with a finality that underscored the end of their relationship. As they left, he could see the weight of the situation settling in, not just for Olivia, but for everyone involved. The house fell into a profound silence, a stark contrast to the earlier chaos. Later that evening, Aiden Foster returned home to an unsettling quietness. As he walked through the house, he noticed a note on the kitchen table. His heart sank as he read Mia's words, which revealed the extent of her betrayal. The note explained that Mia had fallen in love with someone else and had taken their children with her. The divorce papers she left were a formal acknowledgement of her decision, and the most bitter pill to swallow was her demand that Aiden sign adoption papers for their kids, allowing her new partner, Noah Grant, to legally adopt them. The sense of betrayal was compounded by the fact that Mia was leaving him everything, including their house and money, but asking for the most personal part of his life, his children. Stunned and angry, Aiden decided to call Mia. His voice was curt and laden with pain as he greeted her with, "Hey, Mia." Her response, a simple "Hi, Aiden," did little to alleviate his distress. Mia confirmed her new relationship and explained that it was genuine. Aiden, struggling to maintain control, expressed his disbelief. "Yeah, of course you did," he said, the skepticism clear in his tone. He couldn't believe that she had left their marriage so abruptly and hoped that the children had not been directly affected by the situation. After the call, Aiden sought some distraction. He decided to eat out, as cooking felt too laborious given his emotional state. The meal was decent, but it was the bar that offered him a semblance of escape. The drinks provided a temporary numbness, a fleeting reprieve from the emotional turbulence he was experiencing. At the bar, his friend Benjamin noticed him and remarked on his rare appearance. Benjamin's surprise turned to concern as Aiden shared the details of his situation. Aiden recounted how Mia had left him for Noah Grant, the owner of Cars Lake Construction Company. Benjamin was astonished, especially when Aiden mentioned that Mia had moved in with Noah. The revelation hit hard, and Benjamin's questions and responses were tinged with disbelief. Aiden explained that despite the shock, he had decided to give Mia a divorce since she had asked for nothing but the house and money. He also shared his frustration about the adoption papers, emphasizing that he had no intention of signing them. The thought of Noah adopting his children was unacceptable, and Aiden was determined to fight against it. The conversation with Benjamin, while a brief diversion from the pain, left Aiden with more to ponder. He was grappling with the reality of his new life, one that would be marked by a painful separation and the challenge of moving forward. The shock of Mia's betrayal and the future implications for his family weighed heavily on him as he tried to navigate through this unexpected turn of events. Benjamin's reaction to my decision was one of disgust. Cars Lake Construction? What a mess, he muttered. I shot back with a defiant tone, revealing that I had been scheduled to start working for Cars Lake on Monday but had decided to look for another job instead. The idea of directly confronting Noah Grant with any form of retribution was tempting, but I knew it wasn't worth the risk of landing myself in jail. Instead, I took satisfaction in knowing that my subtle revenge was working in unexpected ways. Interestingly, my decision to stay away from Cars Lake Construction had unintended consequences. My conversation with Benjamin had set off a chain reaction. Word of my situation spread, and many local contractors refused to work with Cars Lake Construction. The industry buzzed with talk of how Grant had treated me, and as a result, he found himself struggling to secure reliable contractors. The subpar work delivered by those he could hire only worsened his company's reputation. Over time, Cars Lake Construction's projects suffered from poor quality, adding to Noah's mounting difficulties. The legal process of the divorce dragged on, but 6 months later, it was finally official. Mia wasted no time and married Noah Grant 3 months after our divorce was finalized. During that period, I was responsible for taking care of our kids, Ella and James, while Mia and Noah went on their honeymoon. Although I didn't do it out of goodwill, the week with the kids was easier than the limited time I had on weekends. What troubled me most was Ella's question when she returned. "Daddy, why did you send us to live with Mom and Noah?" Her innocent query cut through me. I tried to explain. "I didn't send you anywhere. Your mother took you because she doesn't love me anymore. If it was up to me, you'd still be living here." I reassured her that it wasn't my choice and that I planned to discuss it further with Mia. When Mia arrived to pick up the kids, she appeared tanned and cheerful, a stark contrast to my own disillusionment. I confronted her, urging her to be honest with the kids about the situation. I warned her that if she didn't tell them the truth, I would. Mia's frustration was evident as she walked away, leaving me with the sense that our unresolved issues were far from over. Living as a single man was an unfamiliar and unsettling experience. Despite friends' attempts to set me up on dates, I wasn't interested in dating. I yearned for love, but wasn't ready to dive into the dating scene. Little did I know that life was about to take another unexpected turn. My new neighbors, Isaac and Sophia, had moved in just after Mia left. Their house, while a great deal, needed considerable work. Sophia worked as a secretary, and Isaac was a retired army man. They were a pleasant couple, and we got along well, sharing friendly conversations whenever we crossed paths. Tragedy struck suddenly when Isaac experienced a health crisis at work. Paramedics and a doctor arrived swiftly, but Isaac was pronounced dead at the scene. The autopsy revealed he had died from a subdural hematoma. Sophia was left devastated and alone. I offered my condolences, and since her parents were on vacation, I walked her home and shared a drink with her. I listened as she poured out her grief and talked about her future plans. That evening, Sophia fell asleep on my couch while I kept watch in a chair, ensuring she wouldn't wake up alone. The next morning, as Sophia was preparing to leave, Mia arrived to drop off the kids. She greeted me with a pointed comment, Good to see you're not wasting any time, Aiden. I replied coolly, come on, Mia. The poor woman just lost her husband. Mia gave me a dismissive glance and turned her attention to the kids. Later that day, I explained to Ella and James why Sophia was leaving the house. Ella seemed sad, while James didn't fully grasp the situation. Sophia later invited me to Isaac's funeral, which I attended. I was relieved that in the UK, mortgages were insured, so Sophia wouldn't be left financially ruined, though it did little to ease her emotional pain. Sophia's parents returned from Europe, and I reassured them that I would look out for Sophia, given that I was her only friend aside from my coworkers. I offered to help with minor household tasks to keep her home livable. Mia, on the other hand, chose to remain in her car whenever she picked up the kids, which suited me just fine. I had no desire to engage with her. As time passed, Sophia and I grew closer, though not romantically. We supported each other as friends, and our connection deepened. About a year later, I overheard James chatting with Sophia in the garden. I called out to him, asking him not to be a pest, but Sophia assured me it was fine. I took the opportunity to invite Sophia to dinner, and she agreed. Ella and James were delighted, and the evening was filled with warmth and laughter. After dinner, Sophia helped with the cleanup and spent some time with us before heading home. I thanked her for her company and the wonderful meal. Ella, with a smile, asked if Sophia was my girlfriend. I replied that Sophia was just a friend and neighbor, although secretly, I thought it would be nice if she were more than that. I kept my feelings to myself, not wanting to complicate things with the kids. On a Sunday afternoon, Mia came to pick up the kids, and I knew they would tell her about Sophia joining us for dinner. True to form, Mia was particularly interested in Sophia during her next visit. I reiterated that Sophia was just a friend, and that Mia's interest in my personal life was none of her business. Mia remarked that she hadn't gotten everything she wanted, to which I retorted that she had left me for a life of luxury with Noah and that he could have his own kids if he wanted them. The conversation left a bitter taste, but I felt a sense of resolution as I continued to rebuild my life. I made it clear to Mia that I was strongly opposed to Noah Grant adopting our children. I emphasized how he had not only taken my wife, but also played a significant role in ruining our marriage. Mia, her face a mask of defiance and wounded pride, pouted and walked home. Despite her sulking, I felt a twinge of satisfaction knowing that I had managed to upset her. A year passed, and I hadn't seen much of Sophia lately, largely due to my busy schedule. My friend Benjamin had asked me to make a bid on a plumbing rewire job for a young couple. My offer was accepted, and I spent the next few weeks immersed in the project. During our time working together, Benjamin kept me updated on the latest about Cars Lake construction. Noah was still struggling to find local professionals, as most refused to work with him. The quality of Cars Lake's projects continued to suffer, a fact that didn't escape the attention of the local community. With the house project completed, I finally had some downtime. I decided to take Sophia out to dinner, and she agreed. We arranged to meet on Saturday night. When I saw Sophia that evening, she took my breath away. Her petite frame and pixie-cut hairstyle made her look charming and elegant. The dress she wore accentuated her slim figure, and for the first time, I felt a strong attraction towards her. Dinner was pleasant, and we spent hours discussing our lives and experiences. When I walked Sophia to her door later that evening, she thanked me for a wonderful night. Before I could respond, she surprised me with a passionate kiss that left me breathless. Afterward, she suggested we go out again to see where things might lead, and with that, she bid me good night, planting a gentle kiss on my cheek. Our subsequent dates quickly deepened our connection, leading to a night we spent together. Despite her small stature, Sophia was incredibly passionate, and our time together was thoroughly satisfying. As our relationship grew, Sophia eventually sold her house and moved in with me. The kids were pleased with this new development, and it was evident they would share the news with Mia, who was likely to be less than thrilled. Mia hadn't wanted me, but Sophia did, and that was what mattered. A year after our first intimate encounter, Sophia and I tied the knot. When Ella informed Mia of our marriage, she merely snorted and turned away, an indication of her lingering bitterness. Sophia and I went on to have 2 children of our own, Isaac and Matthew. With Ella and James older now, they could visit on their own, which reduced my interactions with Mia. Years later, Ella announced her engagement to Samuel. They had initially thought they wouldn't need financial help for their wedding, but Noah Grant offered to cover the costs with the stipulation that he would walk Ella down the aisle. Ella refused his offer, which led Noah to withdraw his support, leaving Ella upset and frustrated. I was incensed by Noah's manipulative behavior, and Sophia suggested using the money from the sale of her house to cover the wedding expenses. Although I hesitated, considering it was Sophia's money, she insisted and encouraged me to tell Ella that we would cover the costs. Ella was overjoyed by the news, and we worked together to create a budget that covered everything they wanted for the wedding while staying under budget. The next day, Ella told me that Noah was furious, and Mia was clearly unhappy about the situation. One afternoon, James showed up unannounced in our garden, expressing his desire to leave home because he was tired of the constant arguments between his mother and Noah. Sophia asked if they were still arguing about the wedding, but James revealed it was about something else. He mentioned overhearing their intimate moments and suggested that Noah wasn't performing well in bed. We shared a laugh about the situation, and I felt a perverse satisfaction that Mia had left me for someone who couldn't fulfill his responsibilities when it mattered most. James decided to stay the night with us to avoid any further conflict at home. On Ella and Samuel's wedding day, Mia's displeasure was evident. Ella informed her that she and Noah would sit behind Sophia and me during the ceremony. The church service proceeded smoothly, and at the reception, I agreed to let Mia sit at the top table. Noah, on the other hand, sat with Sophia, Matthew, Isaac, and James. After the speeches, the caterers moved a few tables to make space for dancing. Samuel and Ella led the first dance, followed by Sophia and me, with Mia and Noah also participating. Later, as the evening wore on, we found ourselves at the bar. Isaac and Matthew were sitting with one of Ella's bridesmaids and her children, while James asked Sophia if she wanted to dance. I encouraged him to ask, and they danced together. Mia, having had a few drinks, took the opportunity to approach me. I had a sense that this encounter might turn unpleasant. She began to comment on Sophia and me, remarking on how youthful Sophia looked and how she hadn't aged despite being the mother of 2 boys. Mia then criticized Sophia's appearance, including her weight and attire. I reminded Mia that we were divorced and she had no right to comment on my life anymore. Despite her ongoing derogatory remarks, I defended Sophia, telling Mia that she was far more of a woman than Mia had ever been. I even hinted at how satisfying my intimate life was with Sophia. Mia was visibly stunned as Noah joined the conversation. I pointed out that when she left me, she believed she was upgrading to something better. Maybe she was, or maybe she wasn't, but I had moved on. I had a fulfilling life, a loving wife, and 4 wonderful children. With that, I walked away, leaving Mia and Noah to their own devices. As Sophia and I danced to slow music, she asked me about the earlier exchange at the bar. I told her to kiss me, promising to explain later. We shared a kiss, knowing that Mia was watching. After breaking the kiss, I smiled at Mia, who turned away to order another drink. As I looked at Sophia, I felt a deep sense of contentment. I had indeed traded up for something better, and my life had turned out far more fulfilling than I had ever imagined.